Good evening, everybody. Good evening. And as always, thank you for being here with us tonight. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to How to Predict A Riot. Christmas season just started. Father Christmas is on its way with wonderful gifts and candies. So please, this year, stay safe at home. Don't go out looking for Father Christmas. He come to you and find you for your gifts. This year, the best gift you could receive is good health for you and your family. Enjoy this tonight. I am Fasal and you are receiving this time Jolly Cascina, a graduate in major at Poitiers University, specialist in racial integration, analyzing discrimination and racism in modern society. Good evening, Jolie.
Good evening, Fasal. I am very happy to be here with you tonight. I love this show, and I'm glad you invited me to discuss together on our favorite topic, history with a capital H.
Thank you, Jolie, for being here with us tonight. We're lucky to have you. Tonight is, as always, a wonderful night to speak about fights, bloods, and shames. No, we're not going to speak about Game of Thrones, unfortunately, but of politics instead. Isn't it awesome? Our topic this time will be a significant event that marked a new step in the British society, the end of a long road inside of a maze full of uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety for racialist people, immigrants, or even British descendants. Personally, I am convinced that the historical event we're about to study was a key moment that built modern society, not only in Britain but all over the world, a moment that brought change, a moment that helped the people to learn to live with each other, despite our differences, origins, our skin color. It was a major event for a country, feared, looked up to for its power and its size. When you're known all over the world for your conquests and achievements, when you're nicknamed the empire where the sun never sets, you have the duty to be an example of dignity and pride for your citizens and for any other government, because every single step you take will impact the world. Tonight, we'll see if those expectations were satisfied. Our topic this time is the second reading of the Race Relations Bill by James Callaghan in 1968, Secretary of State for the Home Department at that period, addressing the commons, the origins of the bill, what may have motivated it, and its repercussions today. Let us remind you what was the First Relations Act and who is James Callaghan.
Let me introduce you a bit about the history of this period. This is the Race Relations Act, one of the first legislation passed in 1965 against racial discrimination in the United Kingdom. This law outlaws all sorts of discriminations as the grounds of color, race, ethnic or national origins in public places in Great Britain. On the first page of this act, we can see that indeed it is effective in certain public places such as restaurants, hotels, theaters. They are places of service to the person. They belong to local authorities. It only affects the economic and public side of this discrimination, nothing in the private side. Before 1965, there was no law prohibiting acts of physical or moral discrimination, nor did it protect these people in the workplace. They were rejected because of their skin color. In 1968, the Race Relations Act reinforced the illegality of discriminating against anyone in employment, advertising, or access to housing on the basis of their origin. The bill took place on November the 8th in 1965 and came into force on December the 8th in 1965. The growth of newcomers to the United Kingdom from other Commonwealth countries only strengthened the passage of this legislation to guarantee their rights. This act prompted the creation of the Race Relations Board in 1966. It specified that the board of directors must be composed of a chairman and two other members. They had to examine the complaints filed under the law. James Callaghan, or Baron Callaghan of Cardiff, was born on the 27th of March in 1912 and died the 26th of March in 2005. He was known as a British politician, Chancellor of Exchequer, Home Secretary and also Foreign Secretary. He was well known as the leader of the Labour Party between 1976 and 1980. But his most important role was as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom between 1976 and 1979. During this period, James Callaghan tried unsuccessfully to raise workers' wages to combat high inflation. Strikes ensued and caused many problems, such as food shortages. As the government could no longer cope with these strikes, a motion of censure was tabled and accepted. The government was won by Margaret Thatcher's Conservative Party. Labour Party would not return to power until 18 years later. In 1968, he was Home Secretary and had to read the Race Relations Bill in the House of Commons.
There was already the Race Relations Act of 1965, so was it necessary to give it a second reading 3 years later?
Well, first, we need to focus on the year. Why 1965? The fact is the UK saw an influx of economic migrants after World War II. So as a result, there were more than 1 million immigrants living in Britain at this time. So discrimination and racism were clearly part of the daily life. A tense time had started because of this situation of inequality in society. And of course, riots in 1958 and in 1963. So they needed to act. And thus, this legislation was born. Indeed, according to Callaghan, the purpose of the first Race Relations Act was to protect society as a whole against action which would lead to social disruption. It was the first act in UK that outlawed racial discrimination in public places. And here's the answer of your second question. This law only affected public places. That was the problem. It was social and economic. But what they really wanted is a freedom and equality, speaking of human rights. So, the second Race Relations Act added more amendments to protect not only their life in society, but also their private life, for example, their job and their house search. It was now allowed to refuse a job or a house rent to someone just because of his skin color.
Here, we have a photograph of the demonstration against the 1962 Immigration Bill about social rights for the Commonwealth citizen to be immune from control. But we cannot say that England has had to face real tension in British society at that time. The only events we can notice are the Notting Hill race riots, a series of racially motivated riots that took place in Notting Hill, in England, between the 29th of August and the 5th of September in 1958. As a result, tensions between members of the white working class and Afro-Caribbean degenerated into open violence in 1958 and 1959. Bristol bus boycott in 1963 arose from the refusal of the Bristol Omnibus Company to employ black or Asian bus crews in the city of Bristol. The boycott, created by Roy Hackett and led by Paul Stevenson and including Owen Henry, Alday Evans and Prince Brown, lasted 4 months, and the company backed down after pressure of the boycott. This campaign was supported by many politicians and had a lot of influence for the 1965 Act. These measures were related to the world advance of rights for people of color. The movements created in these other parts of the world have thus pushed England to join this circle in order to give hope and subsequently improve their lives. Indeed, certain laws have brought more rights, as in 1976 with the Third Relations Act, which strengthened employment rights, covered education, and founded the Commissions for Racial Equality.
I dare to take a wild guess and say, if the Race Relations Act of 1965 was motivated by the riots of Notting Hill in 1968 or the Bristol bus boycott in 1963, why wait until 1965 to establish the Race Relations Act? Why not act in 1963 right away? It seems like the British government wasn't in the urge to act, but something made them reconsider?
Well, it's not easy to establish a new law. There are a lot of steps before the passing of a law, and it changes the way a country works and the people's way of life. So this kind of decision can take more or less time, and we can't say if 2 years was too much or not enough.
In 1968, during the address, Callaghan used the US Constitution in front of the Commons to prove his point. Is the British government using the USA as an example? Did the end of segregation in 1964 persuade the British government to take measures too regarding their own country?
The UK and the USA are both powerful countries which influence the world with a tightly intertwined history. It's no wonder that powerful nations influence each other. The US, the UK, France, Germany, they all inspire one another in order to evolve. It doesn't mean they take example from each other, but we know that they face the same problems concerning freedom, racism and discrimination. Yeah, and of course, the end of the segregation may have motivated the UK to act. Yeah, of course. And not only the UK was touched by the end of the segregation. We all know that.
Martin Luther King was murdered the 4th April in 1968. My point is why this debate at the Commons took place the 24th April, when we know that in April, a few weeks before, in the USA, a tragic event that could motivate the British government to act occurred. Could there be a link between both events? And you know what? I'm really fond of that date, the 23rd April. Will you ask me why? That's my birthday. Yes, I was born the 23rd April. Not in 1968, of course, but it's still my birthday.
Well, I note the date in my diary.
Exactly. You have to write it down, this way you won't forget about it. Everybody here should do the same, this way nobody will pretend to don't know about my birthday. It's simple, to write it down. It's the same concept as the law. It has to be written, this way anybody can have access to that knowledge and nobody can play ignorant about it and violate legislation randomly. Callaghan stated, and I quote, "Social policies by themselves will not be sufficient without legislation." Social policies aren't enough. As a historian, do you agree with that?
Yes I do. A society has to be governed by laws, or it will be anarchy. A written law is indispensable, so that it cannot be changed or reinterpreted by anyone in any way. Non-legal obligation will not necessarily be followed. In that case, I can quote Anthony Lewis in saying, the legislation works because most people in our two countries, the two countries are of course UK and USA, so the two countries are basically law-abiding and will adjust to a changed legal framework.
You quoted Anthony Lewis like Callaghan did in the speech. Speaking of the speech, it really seems like this meeting was to make people realize their mistake and this dangerous path taken. Callaghan had many aims on that day.
Yes. Callaghan makes the Commons realize that they were wrong in 1965. I agree.
Do you think that a third riot after Notting Hill in 1968 and Bristol bursts in 1963 would be one that could be damaging that period of economic stability, and the second reading of the Race Relations Act is only a pretext to show good intentions toward minorities, the main focus being to avoid economical loss?
It's not a matter of whether the Race Relations Act benefits the British government or whether it's acted with the motive to include racialized people into society. But it's to find the best answer for the common benefits and the prosperity of British society and citizens in order to have a thriving and harmonious community. Racialized people are an essential workforce necessary for British society. If there is a country offering better living conditions such as better salary, freedom and equality stated in its law. If these people have the opportunity to live, why would they stay in a less welcoming country? And if they stay, will they be happy? Will they be happy about their condition as second-grade citizens? All these questions were potential risks that could hinder the growth and the prosperity of a British society.
The bill consists of 3 different elements to undo this distinction, promising any prohibition of discrimination on the grounds of race, color, ethnic group, or nationality, and it involves a conciliation process to hear each party, and finally a system of enforcement provisions if the conciliation process fails and the Race Relations Commission takes further action. The legislation was innovative at that time in the United Kingdom. It designated discrimination as a mistake. The state sought to send a message that no one would be discriminated again and that it had to be rectified. The 1968 Act was the extension of this first awareness by heading 2 main areas of life, namely housing and employment. Before that, nothing protected these minorities against direct and explicit discrimination, but these advances made it possible to create new laws to defend their rights. The second reading of the Race Relation Bill considerably changed British society. Racialized people, their anxiety, doubt, and fear were finally cleared, an action that might have avoided heavy and tragic consequences by showing awareness and consciousness. Once again, remarkable individuals, by fighting against blind and insensitive rulers, or sometimes even fighting their own kind for the sake of fairness, motivated decisions that brought a new mentality, new behavior, new culture to embrace. It was a major step into today's modern era. By standing for the oppressed minorities, displaying bravery, or only feeling their duty, or simply by concern over human values, they influenced a change that marked a turning point in history.
It was very interesting to discuss with you, Julie, about this important part of history. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. This show tonight certainly showed us the beginning of a moral and social progress, but unfortunately the fight against racism and discrimination isn't finished 25 years after this law. Don't forget, we have to understand and learn from the past. We need to evolve and continue to fight for our rights. I hope you enjoyed the interview between Julie Kaskina and I hope the film presented by Mélanie you've watched will have allowed you to form your opinion and to better understand the subject. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and see you next time in How to Predict a Riot. A graduate and major at Poitiers University, specialist in